Advantage rarely appears in the moment it is used. It forms quietly, long before anyone notices its shape. Most people believe power comes from motion, from pushing, from proving. But the real game unfolds in the pauses, those subtle choices that shift the landscape without drawing attention. When you step back from the noise, you start to see how influence grows in the shadows of intention. Nothing loud, nothing dramatic, just small movements that tilt outcomes in your favor. You begin to understand that force invites resistance, but silence invites opportunity. The world reacts to pressure, yet it reveals itself to stillness. When you stop trying to win openly, you start noticing how people expose their priorities, their habits, their blind spots, and in that space, you gain a kind of freedom that others never recognize. There is a moment when you realize the game was never about domination. It was about positioning yourself where effort becomes unnecessary. That realization feels like stepping into a hidden corridor, one the crowd walks past without seeing. What lies ahead is not a set of tactics, but a way of perceiving advantage before it exists, shaping outcomes while appearing untouched. It moves quietly behind. Most people grow up believing power looks a certain way. They picture raised voices, bold gestures, and the kind of confidence that fills a room. But what they call strength is usually insecurity dressed as importance. They confuse noise with direction and motion with intention. The result is a world where people follow signals that mean nothing, while overlooking the quiet individuals who shape the environment without ever announcing themselves. When you look closer, you notice how icily the average person clings to appearances. They judge influence by visibility, as if the loudest figure must be the one in control. This misunderstanding creates a gap, and that gap is where real advantage forms. Those who see beyond the surface begin to understand how power actually moves, not in grand displays, but in decisions made long before the moment demands them. There's a strange freedom in realizing how predictably people misread strength. Their assumptions become openings, their reactions become pathways. You start to see how a single calm response can unsettle someone who relies on being heard, how a composed silence can shift the balance of a conversation without effort. The less you reveal, the more others reveal themselves. In that clarity, you no longer chase authority. You observe it, you guide it, and without forcing, you separate yourself from the crowd that mistakes volume for dominance. At some point, you realize that people behave less like mysteries and more like repeating sequences. Their patterns reveal what they fear, what they want, and what they try to hide behind their words. When you stop interpreting them emotionally, the noise fades and the structure becomes clear. You start noticing the rhythm in their reactions, the small consistencies that guide every decision they make. The shift happens quietly. You stop taking things personally because you're no longer viewing them through the lens of your own feelings. You're watching tendencies unfold, almost like observing a current beneath the surface. This distance sharpens your perception. It allows you to understand someone's next move without asking, without guessing, without trying to read the invisible lines between what they say and what they mean. Patterns make people predictable, and predictability gives you room to move. It turns interactions into something calmer, something easier to navigate. You begin to anticipate the moment someone hesitates, the second they overextend, the instant they try to impress or disguise uncertainty. And in those quiet moments, you see the advantage forming. By understanding people as patterns instead of puzzle, you move through the world with clarity. Deliberate, asterisk people pay attention to what they can easily understand, but they become fascinated by what stays just out of reach. When you allow a part of yourself to remain unreadable, you shift the balance of every interaction. Others lean in, trying to fill the gaps you leave open, and in that subtle pull, you gain an upper hand without lifting a finger. Controlled ambiguity isn't about hiding everything. It's about revealing only what serves your direction. The less predictable you appear, the more others hesitate before forming assumptions about you. This hesitation creates space. In that space, people reveal themselves, often without realizing it. They project their expectations, their insecurities, and their desires onto the empty areas you leave untouched. You learn more about them while they learn almost nothing about you. That difference becomes a quiet advantage. You start noticing how uncertainty gives you room to maneuver. When others can't place you, they can't prepare for you. When they don't know what you want, they can't block your path. Ambiguity turns into a form of control that doesn't feel like force. It feels like presence. And as you hold that presence, you realize how powerful it is to be partially known known, yet never fully grasped. In that quiet uncertainty, you guide interactions without appearing to lead, allowing advantage to grow naturally around the space your ambiguity creates for you. Silence carries a weight that spoken words rarely hold. When you choose not to respond immediately, you create a pause that shifts the rhythm of any exchange. People rush to fill silence because it exposes their discomfort, and in that rush, they reveal far more than they intend. Withdrawal isn't retreat. It's a way of watching the landscape rearrange itself around your calm. The moment you stop reacting on demand, you start influencing the pace of the interaction. Silence also sharpens your perception. Without the pressure to speak, you notice subtle details, the hesitation in someone's tone, the impatience behind their questions, the small cracks in their confidence. These details guide you more effectively than any loud declaration. While others chase control through constant engagement, you gain it by stepping back. There's a tension that forms when you withhold your voice. People begin to wonder what you're thinking, what you're planning, and why you're not giving them anything to work with. And as they attempt to decode your quiet, they expose their priorities, their fears, and their motives. Silence, used deliberately, turns into a weapon that shapes outcomes without needing force. Most people listen to words as if they hold the full truth, but intent hides beneath the surface. When you stop focusing on what someone says and start noticing why they say it, the entire interaction changes. You begin to see the quiet motives that guide their tone, their timing, and the emotion behind their statements. Words become signals, not answers, and those signals reveal far more than direct explanations ever could. Intent shows itself through small inconsistencies. A person may speak boldly, yet their eyes flicker with uncertainty. They may offer support, yet their timing reveals hesitation. These subtle cues form a map that leads you to their true position. And once you learn to read that map, influence becomes a matter of observation rather than effort. You understand someone's direction long before they take the first step. Shifting your attention to intent also frees you from emotional reaction. You no longer absorb the surface level meaning of their words. You study the purpose behind them. This distance gives you an advantage that feels calm and deliberate. You stay grounded while others reveal themselves through impulse and tone. And in that steady clarity, you gain a quiet dominance, not through pressure, but through true understanding. Proximity can feel like strength, but it often blurs your vision. When you stand too close to someone, you absorb their moods, their expectations, and their distractions. You stop seeing their patterns clearly because you've stepped inside their emotional space. Distance sharpens what closeness does. It allows you to observe without becoming tangled in the noise that surrounds them. With a little space, motives become clearer, habits become easier to read, and the power dynamics between you and them shift naturally. When you pull back even slightly, you reclaim the vantage point that gets lost when you try to stay connected. You notice things you missed before: the way someone changes their tone, the timing of their reactions, the pressure they try to apply in conversations. These details reveal more than any direct question ever could. Distance becomes a form of clarity. There's also strength in not being constantly available. When others feel your presence but can't access you freely, they become more intentional in how they approach you. They think before they speak. They reconsider before they demand. Your space forces them to show their priorities without you asking. In that space, leverage grows quietly, and you begin to move with a sharper, more deliberate sense of strategy for you. There is a unique kind of influence that comes from being present without being fully reachable. When people feel your attention but can't grasp your inner world, they respond to you differently. You become someone they can see but not hold. Someone whose presence carries weight simply because it isn't constantly offered. This creates an air of stability that doesn't rely on noise or explanation. Your energy becomes controlled, intentional, and measured. Staying untouchable doesn't mean being cold. It means keeping a quiet boundary between your inner thoughts and the roles you play in the world. You engage when needed, you step back when it's wise, and you refuse to let others pull you into their emotional currents. This balance allows you to stay involved without being consumed. People sense that you're there, yet they can't quite predict your next move or fully read your intention. This uncertainty draws them in. They become more careful around you, more thoughtful, more aware. Your steadiness creates contrast against their restlessness. You don't react, you choose. You don't chase, you observe. And through this subtle distance, you become someone others respect instinctively. They feel your presence, but they can't influence your center. And that separation gives you a quiet form of power power that grows stronger with deliberate restraint. Patience is one of the most underrated forms of leverage. When you allow others to make the first move, they reveal more than they intend. Their pace, their tone, their eagerness, and their hesitation all speak before their actual words do. By waiting, you watch the natural unfolding of their priorities. You see what they want, what they fear, and how they try to position themselves. This gives you insight that cannot be forced or rushed. Letting others reveal themselves isn't passive, it's deliberate. You create a space where people feel the need to fill the silence, to show their hand, to prove something. And the moment they do, you gain clarity. You start recognizing the difference between genuine intent and disguised motives. Their actions begin telling you the truth they would never say outright. When you hold your position and allow the world to come forward first, you stop walking blind. You become an observer with the advantage of distance. Others expose their strategies while you maintain your calm. This shift changes the dynamic entirely. You no longer step into situations guessing. You enter with understanding, grounded and composed, already knowing more than you reveal in every unfolding moment. People repeat themselves more than they realize. Their impulses follow familiar tracks, and once you notice the pattern, you see how predictable human nature truly is. Most reactions come from habit, not thought. Most decisions are shaped by comfort, not logic. This predictability becomes a foothold for those who watch closely. You begin to anticipate how someone will respond before they even consider their option. Their need for validation, their desire to be liked, their instinct to avoid discomfort, all of it becomes a map you can read with surprising accuracy. When you recognize these impulses, interactions start to feel slower, almost as if you're watching them from a higher vantage point. You see the hesitation behind their confidence, the doubt behind their certainty, and the quiet hunger behind their politeness. These subtle tells reveal more than declarations ever could. They show you where someone is, mentally, emotionally, and strategically. Predictability doesn't make people weak, it makes them human, but understanding it gives you an edge. You move with purpose while others move on autopilot. You choose your responses while they fall into familiar patterns. And in that difference, a small, almost invisible advantage begins to grow, steady and effortless, shaped by the natural rhythm of human behavior. For you, fear exposes what people try hardest to hide. It sits beneath their choices, shaping their reactions long before they understand them. When someone avoids conflict, you see their fear of rejection. When they over-explain themselves, you see their fear of misunderstanding. When they rush to impress, you see their fear of inadequacy. These fears create openings, not because you exploit them, but because they reveal the truth behind a person's behavior. Observing fear removes the need for emotional judgment. You're not reacting to the feeling itself. You're watching how it guides their decisions. It gives you insight into what they protect, what they run from, and what they cannot tolerate. This clarity turns interactions into something calmer and more deliberate. When you understand what someone fears, you understand how they operate. You can predict where they'll retreat, where they'll hesitate, and where they'll attempt to mask vulnerability with confidence. Their fear shapes their path, and once you see that path clearly, you navigate around it with ease. The result is a quiet awareness that strengthens your position without the need to force anything at all. The most effective influence is the kind that never feels like influence. When people believe a choice is theirs, they defend it, justify it, and follow through with conviction. Your role is not to command, but to create an environment where the direction you prefer becomes the direction they naturally lean toward. Subtle cues replace instructions. Small suggestions replace pressure. You guide them gently toward conclusions that feel self-made. This approach works because it respects human nature. People resist force, but they welcome ideas that seem to match their own perspective. When you frame things in a way that aligns with their desires, they move willingly. When you mirror their motivations, they feel understood. And when you step back and let them walk the path you've shaped, they believe they arrived there alone. The power lies in restraint. You don't need to assert control when you can shape conditions that encourage the outcomes you want. You become the quiet presence that influences decisions without disrupting autonomy. Over time, people gravitate toward your direction, not because you push them, but because it feels like the most natural path forward. That is influence at its most refined, subtle, effortless, and profoundly effective. People assume influence comes from speaking often and pushing hard, but the deeper form of leverage grows in silence. When you become someone whose presence adds value with without demanding attention. People begin to rely on you in ways they don't fully realize. They come to you not because you insist, but because you offer something steady, something they can't easily replace. Quiet value creates a stronger pull than loud persuasion ever could. The moment others sense they need what you bring, your clarity, your composure, your perspective, the dynamic shifts. They listen more. They adjust without being asked. They consider your reactions before making decisions. This happens not through dominance, but through the subtle gravity of usefulness. Being needed makes your voice heavier, even when you speak lightly. It makes your presence felt, even when you're not trying to be seen. You stop chasing influence, because influence begins to anchor itself around you. People move toward those who improve their direction without trying to control it. And in that calm, understated way, you gain leverage that feels natural, not force-born from the value you hold, not the noise you make. Scarcity changes the psychology of attention. When something becomes slightly harder to access, people instinctively assign it more value. The same dynamic applies to your presence. When you limit how much of yourself you offer, not out of arrogance, but out of intention, you create a magnetic pull that others feel immediately. They sense that your time and energy are not freely available, and that awareness reshapes how they approach you. This restraint builds authority without needing to declare it. By not always being present, you teach others to adjust their expectation. They begin to prepare before speaking with you. They think more carefully about what they ask. They become more deliberate because they realize they cannot rely on unlimited access. Scarcity also protects your inner stability. When you choose where to invest your attention, you remain centered instead of being pulled into unnecessary exchanges. Your selectiveness becomes part of your identity, a quiet signal that your focus is valuable and not easily claimed. Over time, people begin to treat your involvement as something meaningful, something that carries weight. They listen more closely. They hesitate before interrupting your direction. And without raising your voice or demanding respect, you become someone whose presence alters the atmosphere simply because it is not guaranteed. There is a certain power in letting others make the first move. When you wait, you shift the dynamic of the interaction. People reveal their intentions through their actions, not their words. By holding steady, you gain insight into what they want, how they think, and where they're trying to position themselves. This patience gives you an advantage that doesn't require pressure, simply allows the truth to unfold at its own pace. When others move first, you remain in control of the response. You're not reacting impulsively, you're choosing deliberately. You watch their direction, and then you decide whether to mirror it, redirect it, or let it collapse under its own weight. This calm approach unsettles people who expect immediate engagement. The more you practice this, the more you notice how often people act from urgency rather than intention. They rush, they assume, they reveal too much. And you, by waiting, keep your position grounded and clear. This isn't passivity, it's measured dominance, the kind that shapes outcomes without confrontation. You influence the flow of the interaction by refusing to be pulled into its first impulse. In that stillness, others expose their strategy while you refine yours, giving you the upper edge without a single forced move. Asterisk detachment is not indifference, it is clarity. When you step back from the emotional currents around you, the world becomes easier to read. Others act on impulse, driven by fear, desire, or pride. But when you remain emotionally distant, those impulses reveal themselves without distortion. You see opportunities that others miss, patterns that remain hidden in the rush of reaction. Emotional distance allows you to anticipate moves, to calculate responses, and to act when the moment is truly advantageous. Being unaffected by the highs and lows around you reduces the risk of manipulation. People often try to steer those who react, but when you do not, their efforts collapse quietly. They underestimate the calm observer, believing influence requires participation in the drama. Instead, your neutrality creates a buffer, a space where thought replaces reaction and foresight replaces instinct. This distance does not remove engagement, it enhances it. You still interact, still act, but with measured intent. Each choice is deliberate because it is free from the distortions of emotional entanglement. Others may believe they are influencing the flow, but you remain centered. You control the trajectory not through force, but by preserving a space where logic, observation, and strategy dominate. In that space, power grows quietly, invisibly, yet unmistakably. Remaining unshaken under pressure is a skill few cultivate, but it is one of the most visible markers of internal power. When chaos erupts, people reveal themselves through tension, haste, and overreaction. action. The individual who stays composed becomes an anchor not just for themselves, but for those around them. Calmness signals control, competence, and awareness, even if no words are spoken. The key is not suppressing emotion, but observing it. You notice the signals others emit, the rapid speech, the slight tremor, the impatient gestures, while your own demeanor remains steady. This awareness allows you to respond precisely, rather than reacting reflexively. Each interaction becomes measured, intentional, and purposeful. The effect on others is subtle yet profound. People naturally defer to calmness, even unconsciously. They test, they probe, they push, and in the face of unflinching composure, they often reveal more than intended. You remain grounded while the world moves in fits and starts around you. That centeredness builds a sense of inevitability, as though your control is natural, unquestionable, and untouchable. By mastering unreactivity, you gain a quiet dominance that influences outcomes without appearing forceful. Calmness itself radiates authority. When your demeanor remains steady while others fluctuate, a kind of invisible magnetism forms. People instinctively respect the composure they cannot mirror, and they hesitate before acting against someone whose presence does not waver. Serenity becomes a statement, louder than any argument, more convincing than any declaration. The aura of calm authority works because it suggests mastery. It signals that you are not at the mercy of circumstance or impulse, that your decisions are guided by insight rather than reaction. Those around you sense it before they understand it. They feel the weight of steadiness, the subtle influence of a mind in control. This presence shapes behavior without direct instruction. People adapt, defer, and navigate around your stability, often believing it to be a natural law rather than a deliberate strategy. Calmness becomes more than a personal trait. It becomes a tool, a shield, and a subtle form of influence. In maintaining serenity, you project an unspoken power that commands attention, inspires respect, and shifts dynamics quietly, effortlessly, and irresistibly. True power rarely announces itself. It moves in silence, shaping outcomes, while others argue over visibility. Those who rely on loud displays, confrontation, and attention are easily destabilized when faced with deliberate, quiet action. When you act without seeking recognition, you disrupt the expectations of those around you. They anticipate noise, but you provide precision. They wait for gestures, but you move subtly, letting consequences unfold naturally. Your actions ripple outward without the need for applause, leaving others unprepared and off balance. Silent action forces them to adapt on instinct rather than strategy. They hesitate, second guess, and expose gaps in their own planning. While they scramble for influence, you remain composed, letting momentum bend to your advantage. Each unspoken choice becomes a lever, each quiet movement a pivot point. Over time, this restraint accumulates into authority. The absence of noise is not weakness. It is a form of control that others cannot counter because they cannot measure it. Those who embrace quiet dominance learn to let results speak instead of words. You do not need to defend, explain, or assert yourself. The impact of your presence and action becomes self-evident, shaping the environment in subtle yet undeniable ways that leave competitors reacting. Never leading. Timing is more powerful than speed. Acting too soon invites mistakes, while acting too late forfeits opportunity. True leverage lies in choosing the exact moment where impact is maximized and resistance minimized. When you wait, you observe, measure, and anticipate the movements of others. You learn the rhythm of their reactions, the tempo of their desires, and the pressure points they reveal. Then, when the moment arrives, your action carries disproportionate influence. Restraint amplifies effect. A delayed response signals awareness and control, creating tension in those who expected immediacy. People begin to question their assumptions, second-guess their plans, and adjust to your cadence. That hesitation is a gift. It allows you to act with precision while others remain reactive. Timing also masks intent. When you move at the right moment, your decisions appear effortless, almost inevitable. Others fail to see the preparation behind the move, and your advantage grows quietly. By combining patience with observation, you manipulate outcomes without force. Control becomes invisible, and the world bends subtly to the rhythm you choose. The mastery of timing transforms ordinary actions into instruments of strategy. You act not when pressured, but when the environment aligns with your design, making every move count far more than those made in haste or panic. When people overextend, they reveal their limits. Acting impulsively exposes gaps in judgment. Mistakes mistakes that careful observation would have prevented. By allowing others to take the first step, you set the stage for advantage without confrontation. Their energy is spent on actions that serve their urgency, not their strategy. You remain steady, watching the natural consequences of their choices unfold. This patience allows you to capitalize on their errors without lifting a finger. They move too fast, they reveal too much, and you position yourself where their overreach becomes your opportunity. Their missteps provide clarity about priorities, weaknesses, and intentions that would otherwise remain hidden. The moment you step in, it is measured, deliberate, and precise. You intervene only when the stage is set, letting their impulses do the work for you. Advantage emerges naturally from their own momentum, and your role is to direct it subtly, guiding outcomes with minimal effort. By letting others overextend, you conserve energy, preserve composure, and achieve results that appear effortless, creating dominance that feels inevitable and unquestionable. People often try to replicate what they admire without ever grasping the reasoning behind it. When you act with subtlety and purpose, others may imitate your methods, your timing, your composure, yet they fail to comprehend the calculations that guide you. This creates a rare form of influence, one that is visible in effect but invisible in process. They copy your gestures, your routines, even your decisions, while never truly stepping into your mindset. That gap between imitation and understanding builds an aura of mystique, quiet superiority that commands attention without confrontation. Being imitated without being understood grants freedom. You move through situations with discretion, shaping outcomes while the world reacts to the surface-level reflection of your choices. People may try to predict your behavior based on their observations, but they cannot anticipate the strategy beneath. This unseen depth strengthens your presence because influence becomes an emergent property rather than a forced assertion. You do not need to explain yourself, justify your decisions, or claim authority. Your subtle consistency guides others, and the gap between what they see and what you control becomes the foundation of quiet power. Through this, you close the loop of transformation. You are no longer merely participating, you are guiding, shaping, and redefining the dynamics around you while remaining deliberately unknowable. Leadership does not always require being at the forefront. Some of the strongest influence comes from invisible present shaping decisions, behavior, and outcomes without ever drawing notice to the hand guiding them. When you act like a quiet force in the background, others move as if by instinct, guided by signals they do not consciously perceive. This ghost-like presence allows you to manage complex interactions with minimal exposure, maintaining control while avoiding resistance. The effect is subtle yet pervasive. People adjust their actions, measure their responses, and align with currents you've influenced without recognizing the source. They operate within parameters you have shaped, believing it to be natural or their own doing. Your influence becomes a quiet architecture, supporting decisions, shaping priorities, and guiding outcomes while remaining almost entirely unseen. Operating this way demands patience and observation. You must resist the urge to make your hand visible, to seek recognition, or to force compliance. The more imperceptible your guidance, the stronger its effect. In mastering this, you achieve a rare form of power, one that affects the world deeply, efficiently, and without confrontation, leaving your presence felt more than observed. The ultimate form of influence is shaping outcomes while remaining unexposed. When you understand human nature, timing, and subtle dynamics, you occupy a position where events unfold according to patterns you've anticipated. You do not need to announce control or assert authority. Your quiet presence is enough to align circumstances with your intentions. This creates a sense of inevitability around your influence, where results feel natural and effortless, even if meticulously guided. Becoming the one who moves things from the background requires self-discipline and restraint. You act only when the situation aligns with your understanding, allowing others to expend energy, reveal motives, and make decisions that serve your direction without realizing it. Your role is both observer and conductor, orchestrating outcomes with minimal interference. By shaping circumstances quietly, you close the circle of strategic mastery. You are steady, composed, and aware, operating beyond the immediate perception of others. Each decision, each pause, each subtle adjustment consolidates your position. In this stillness, you find a profound empowerment, calm, deliberate, and absolute, the signature of someone who guides the world without being seen, yet whose influence is undeniable.